Good morning. I'd like to congratulate you all for being here in this weather, braving this weather.
Yes, you do.
No picture.
With respect, we acknowledge the Nevada County campus of Sierra College.
I tend to fly under the radar.
I understand that, but once in a while.
And unceded homelands of the
Why do you
Nisenan
think
peoples.
Chris
For
has never
countless
heard my voice?
generations, the Nisenan have carried out their responsibility as stewards of this place, originally known as DASPA. Sierra College commits to an ongoing relationship with the Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan tribe and their future generations who are an integral part of the Sierra College community. Good morning and thank you for being here in this terrible weather day. But we like the water, right, Jennifer? We like the water. Yes. Perfect topic. I'm Judy East, and I'm the chair of the Nevada County Council of Sierra College Foundation, and we are very, very pleased to sponsor these community forums. I think we're at like 15 months now, and we're thrilled to have you come on
You were
campus.
number one.
One of our goals is to increase the awareness in the community of the resource that Sierra College is, and so we're glad you're here today. If you have not seen our community forums, they are available online at sierracollege.edu/NCC, and you'll see on that page that it will say community forums, and we hope that you'll be able to check those out if you haven't been able to see them. And so now to our program. Oh, wait, one more thing. If you have not signed the email list and would like to be on our email list, this will go around.
Great, thanks, Judy. I'm Terry McAteer, the retired county superintendent of schools and the moderator for today's discussion with our general manager of Nevada Irrigation District. So why don't you give a warm welcome to Jennifer Hanson, if you don't mind. And so this conversation is going to go on for almost 45 minutes, and then we're going to open it up to you to ask some questions. So just to let you know, we're not interested in hearing your question that your water bill, comes 3 days late or something, and you'd like it to. So general questions that would be specific enough that it would benefit everyone. So Jennifer, thanks for the time. Hey, what do water managers think when there's a deluge over the next few days? I mean, we're saying, oh God, it's raining. Thank God, fire seasons. What are you thinking?
We get extremely, am I on?
Let's try. Hello,
oh,
you're on.
All right. Well, we first and foremost get extremely excited. We love rain. We do love snow more than rain, but this storm hasn't started snowing yet, last I checked. But my main goal for right now is to start seeing Rollins spilling. So.
And what does that mean? How far is Rollins from spilling?
So I think Rollins was about 50,000 acre feet as of yesterday, maybe 48 to 50,000 acre feet. Has about 68,000 acre feet of storage. And we could talk about this more in a second, but we share storage in Rollins with PG&E. So they have contractual rights to about 10,000 acre feet of storage in Rollins Reservoir. And right now they have about 25,000 acre feet of storage. But as soon as they start spilling, we get a bunch of free water, which if any of you have been watching the PG&E issues we've been having, is very meaningful to us.
So Jen, let's talk about the PG&E, because everybody's known about this. What one word do you sort of use to describe this experience with PG&E?
Well, I'll try to make it PG, since we are being filmed. Frustrating.
Frustrating.
Yeah, frustrating. A colossal debacle. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And so tell us where we are currently in this debacle. Are we towards the end of the debacle?
No. So you know what might be helpful? Is I do have a few slides, but we're going to skip ahead. So let's go to the upper division map. All right. So this right here, this map illustrates, and I'm going to just get up for a second so I can orient myself. So this map represents what we refer to as the upper division of Nevada Irrigation District, and we pull water from several different watersheds, from the Yuba watershed, Bear River watershed, Deer Creek, Wolf Creek, Raccoon Creek, and Auburn Ravine. Most of our water comes out of the Yuba and the Bear watershed. And just to orient you, that's Bowman Reservoir is up in the left corner, and then we have a number of smaller reservoirs, Sawmill, Jackson, French, and Fauchery. All of those, and then PG&E owns all these other little reservoirs. All this water comes through these watersheds, and it all enters into Spalding Reservoir, which is owned by PG&E. From Spalding Reservoir, we then take water into two primary distribution systems. One we refer to as Deer Creek, which is the Scotts Flat Reservoir system. And then the other one is along the Bear River, and that is the reservoir system that goes into Rollins Reservoir and then to Comby and down into western Placer County. So what's happening is there's been 4 significant issues at the Spalding Reservoir, which PG&E owns, at 4 different portions of their facilities. There's actually 3 powerhouses located at Spalding Reservoir, and 2 of the powerhouses, which we refer to as Spalding 1 and Spalding 2, are having significant issues, which we feel are a reflection of poor maintenance practices. But the final determination on that, I'm sure, will be determined by courts at some point in the future. There was then also an issue with the South Yuba pipeline, which feeds the South Yuba Canal. So I don't know if is everybody, how familiar do you feel with the N.I.D system? Thumbs up, halfway? Okay. So out of Spalding, we essentially then can split water into our 2 systems. One down to the Deer Creek system, which goes out of Spalding 2 powerhouse, and then goes into the South Yuba pipe, and then into N.I.D's newly acquired South Yuba Canal. The South Yuba Canal goes to the Deer Creek powerhouse, and then most of the water, we peel off some water prior to it getting to Scotts Flat, but that's where most of the water to Scotts Flat goes. N.I.D, almost approximately a year ago, we finalized acquisition of the South Yuba Canal system and the Deer Creek powerhouse. And a little fun fact, how much do you think that we paid for that system?
Too much.
Oh, God, somebody back there knows. Well, and actually, George, you're wrong, because we didn't pay $1. They paid us $250,000 to take it because of the shape it was in. So we acquired the South Yuba Canal and we didn't acquire the pipeline portion. The pipeline portion is the top 2 miles of it, and it's a giant pipeline that's essentially on the side of a hill. Last, probably February timeframe, there's a large rock slide that took the pipe out. So we are no longer able to get water out of Spalding 2 through the pipeline into Scotts Flat. So that's issue number 1. Issue number 2 occurred at Spalding 1 powerhouse. They had issues with their pressure reducing valves. So anytime you start and stop a major hydraulic system, you have to reduce pressure, otherwise it'll cause hammering in the system and essentially break the powerhouse. So they were doing something, and they had a major failure in the powerhouse where 2 large concrete steel line discharge horns were destroyed, as well as columns that were supporting the powerhouse. So that resulted in us not being able to pull water through Spalding 1 either. So Spalding 1 goes to Rollins, Spalding 2 goes to Scotts Flat. They then had another situation at the Spalding 2 powerhouse where they had some internal gates break. They tried to fix them, and then they ended up burning up some of the parts of the powerhouse, specifically the turbine parts, some bearings and some governors. They also had a 4th issue. So if you tracked me now, I'm down to the 4th issue. We had pipeline, issue number 1, Spalding 1, issue number 2, Spalding 2, issue number 3, and then the low-level outlet, which would have enabled us to bypass some water out of Spalding into the Bear River, which we are able to spill into both systems, is broken and has been for a couple of years now. So that would be issue number 4.
So, Jen, this is, we only have, 45 minutes or so. So it sounds like if you go to your next couple slides down, we got that next one, that one.
That one.
That seems to be it in a nutshell.
Yes.
Is you've got this great watershed, you have a wonderful distribution system, but there's a tremendous bottleneck in a 2-mile stretch.
Correct.
And so, how would you describe your relations with Pacific Gas and Electric at this point?
Well, so I think what a lot of people don't maybe not understand is that on a daily basis, because our systems are so interconnected, our staff, at the staff level, we have to talk all the time to the point of, okay, we're going to increase flows into the South Yuba Canal by 20 CFS. That then causes impacts or operational concerns that we have to manage on our end. We also do larger coordination on a weekly basis about whose water is where in the system. It's all accounted for, not only from an ownership perspective, but also from a water rights reporting perspective. We are required by state law to report on every drop of water, how we divert it, and then where it is used. But then on the kind of larger scale of dealing with these issues, it can be fairly contentious. We essentially are two different types of entities. N.I.D is a public entity, and our first and foremost concern is water delivery, whereas they're a power generation and retail power energy provider. And they're also a for-profit company, which is completely different than us. Yeah. So there is some contention at kind of the bigger picture issues. They do, at the staff level, they work extremely hard to get us water as much as they can, and they understand the position that we're in. But there have been a lot of contentious board meetings. If you haven't been able to watch them, they are kind of fun to go back and watch. And I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that Ricky Heck, one of our board directors, is in the audience. Ricky, can you raise your hand? Wave. All right. And then Rich Johansson is also a N.I.D board director. So they have worked tirelessly on behalf of the customers to try to mitigate impacts to the situation and to encourage PG&E to expedite any repairs. And at some points there's probably no other word for it, kind of ugly.
Ugly.
Yeah.
So with this ugliness, I mean, has PG&E stepped up and said, gee, you know what, we really have not done a very good job. We really want to reach out to you and do anything we can to make this, ameliorate this situation?
No.
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 I mean, it's cost you revenue. It's cost agricultural and homeowner users, having to reduce. And so, have they offered some compensation to N.I.D for this problem?
No, and in fact, I think not so fun fact to learn is that N.I.D has incurred major expenses associated with these outages. Not only have we received reduction in revenue from lack of sales because we've had to have water restrictions, but also we're going to be probably about $2.5 million in the hole once this is all said and done. And who can guess who our biggest bills we've been having to pay is to?
Lawyers.
No. PG&E. Oh. Yeah. Because of the situation, we've had to increase pumping and also purchase of water from PG&E. Okay. So our increased pumping has directly resulted in increased electrical costs, as well as we have a large legal agreement that governs how we manage our systems and operate our systems together. And within that agreement, there are provisions that enable N.I.D to purchase PG&E water, and we've had to purchase some of their water that they store in Rollins to backstop water. Our own water, we're not able to move through the system because of this situation.
Well, the word ugly is really the right word. So what's the future look like? I mean, it seems like you're headed for a court case to be able to recoup some of these costs on their lack of maintenance or so. And is that where you see this eventually ending up? You sort of started with that.
Yeah, I think so. In an ideal world, we'd be able to resolve this without going through the court system, which, as many of you know, can take up to a decade to end up getting resolved. One of the provisions that's probably the most frustrating for me that's included in our agreement, which we refer to as the Coordinated Operating Agreement, or the COA, is that when there's an extraordinary event related to specific pieces of infrastructure, N.I.D, as well as Placer County Water Agency, depending on the infrastructure, we could have a cost-sharing component of it. So they have notified us that they are going to request cost-sharing of some of these repairs. But there's, right?
Yeah, that's chuckle.
Yeah. But there is also a question. Each of the entities, N.I.D as well as PG&E, within our agreement, we are required to operate our systems to a standard of a reasonable utility practice. And so based off of the large number of maintenance issues all in one area, that's obviously where we'll be looking.
So you're obviously also, this has changed your thought about how our infrastructure is going to look here in the future. I'm sure it's been an eye-opener of the problems. And so tell us what's changed for N.I.D over the last couple of years in thinking about your infrastructure, especially that 2-mile bottleneck.
Yeah, I would say there's a couple of major things that have changed, specifically for me. One is we hear a lot of folks talk about, will we have enough water in the future, which we will likely have some challenges related to climate change. But I think a more immediate priority for me is dealing with some of these high-risk pieces of infrastructure. And so one is obviously this whole situation surrounding Spalding. This has shown us that we are reliant on a neighbor who may or may not withhold the same standard for maintenance and operation that we do. And then secondly, we do have a very high-risk piece of infrastructure, which we call the South Yuba Canal, or I'll say it, Rich doesn't always like it when I say this, but we also refer to the South Yuba Canal as the Flume of Doom. So, it's built in the late 1800s. There is 14 miles of it that are on elevated wooden flume in probably the most fire-prone area in Northern California. The Yuba watershed has not burned. And so the likelihood of a large fire in that area is probably pretty high, at least within my lifetime. And so if the South Yuba Canal were to burn and go down, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars to be able to restore water service back to Scotts Flat.
Okay. So Jen, how are you, the topic is how secure is our water here today. So how secure do you feel about our water today?
On a day-to-day basis, I feel fairly secure. From the standpoint that we have an amazing operations team, we just went through one of the most challenging water supply issues a water district could face with this PG&E issue, and we were still able to make deliveries. On a long-term basis, I think that we're going to need to put in the effort to do some master planning to systematically look at shoring up some of the more high-risk pieces of infrastructure, which is going to cost money.
Obviously.
Yeah.
So is this a 5-year plan, 10-year plan? How are you going to secure that flume, essentially?
Right. So what we're doing right now is we are entering into rate setting. N.I.D has not raised rates in over 3 years now. And as part of when you go into rate setting is governed by Proposition 218, which essentially states that you have to have your cost to provide service to any specific customer class has to have a correlation to the charge that you charge them. And so what we're doing right now is going through a little bit of a long-term capital improvement planning effort where we're looking at more systematic replacement. And so we are looking at, in this analysis, systematically what it would cost to systematically replace pieces of the South Yuba Canal to at least put it on steel trusses.
Uh-huh. And so I know that you've also come forward and gotten rid of the Centennial Dam project. Why don't you tell this audience why the board and you are not moving forward, as was the case 5-6 years ago on Centennial?
Yeah, that's a great question, Terry. So how many people were following the plan for water process? Couple? Okay, so I won't bore y'all to death because I know it was how many years of meeting? 2.5 years of meetings. When I first came on board at N.I.D, the board had charged me with putting together the plan for water process. And the plan for water process was envisioned to be a process by which we looked at demands as well as water supply needs over a 50-year period. In doing that process, we did a lot of really neat things. We did a deep dive on the legal aspects, water rights, the history of our system, and also some of the risks and challenges associated with it. The main component of the whole plan for water was to do extensive modeling, and one of the things that we did that most agencies have not done in California yet is we use climate change hydrology to determine impacts not only on water supply, but we also incorporated climate change influences on future demand. And what it actually showed us is that under each of the 3 climate change hydrology scenarios that we looked at is that it is likely that N.I.D will experience a water shortage at some point in the future. What you'll essentially see is wet periods and then real dry periods. So we're on our 3rd year of a really wet period. So I would anticipate that we're going to be hitting a dry period soon. But what it also showed us, which is the most challenging for NID to deal with, is we are a small reservoir, high elevation system. And our storage is contained in high, small reservoirs. So what that means is that historically, who's like me? I have an indoor in-the-house refrigerator and freezer, and then I have the garage fridge and freezer, right? I also have 3 children. So, we relied on the snowpack as kind of that garage freezer. And because our reservoirs are so small, the garage freezer is going to be going away with climate change. We're going to be experiencing more precipitation in the form of rain versus snow, which means our small reservoirs are going to have a more difficult time capturing and storing enough water, not just to carry us through 1 year, but to carry us through any kind of 3-4 year dry period. So with that, we went and looked at a variety of different options, including conservation, including putting more efficiencies into the canal system for raw water delivery. But we also looked at 2 primary storage projects. One was on Rollins and one was on Centennial. And Centennial, although it was planned to be bigger, it was planned to be about 110,000 acre feet, about 98,000 acre feet of available water storage for water use. It actually doesn't help as much as doing a smaller raise on Rollins. Do you know what? Does anyone know why? I know George does, but George can't answer. Elevation. It's too low in the system. So because it's so low in the system, it just has a smaller area of benefit, a lower number of customers it can benefit. So even if you did a 50,000 acre foot raise at Rollins versus a brand new reservoir of 110,000 acre feet, Rollins actually would provide more benefit.
And so that's sort of the new plan, doing Rollins.
The new plan is to take a deeper dive. It's extremely difficult to do any type of storage increase project in California, not just from a regulatory perspective, but also from the perspective that Rollins, when it was originally built, wasn't built contemplating it being raised.
Right.
So we will start taking a look at some of the in-depth engineering and geotechnical analysis that needs to be completed in order to determine whether or not it's technically feasible to raise Rollins and what cost would that be. A full raise of Rollins would essentially be you could build a new dam in front of it, you could build a new dam behind it, or you could raise the existing dam. Or a second option, which would be a much smaller raise, which I think would be more palatable, is to raise the existing weir of the spillway to get about 10 to 12,000 acre feet of storage. Both of those are not confirmed from engineering perspective yet. There was some analysis that was completed in the late 1980s timeframe, so that needs to be picked back up and looked at.
So what other storage means are you looking at? Outside of the Rollins and the Centennial's gone, are there other storage means that you're looking at?
Now, one of the things we do hear a lot with climate change is, and I'm sure a lot of those folks that have been around for a long time have been noticing, is that we're starting to get summer extended more into the fall period. And it's not unlikely to see hot time periods in October and even well into November. So we stop irrigation season October 15th. And for some of the agricultural customers, they cannot kind of handle those shoulder months before when the rain starts. So one of the things actually with Rich's guidance that we've been looking at is supporting micro storage on actual parcels for those folks who need water in that time period, so that they don't have to rely on the NID system, but they could store water in a pond or a tank for those purposes.
Because what percent actually is domestic use and agricultural use?
Yeah, so that's a good topic. So we have about 26,000 customers. About 5,000 of them are raw water customers. So what is the guess on treated versus raw? So we have 20,000 treated water customers. How much of our total water use do you think raw water uses? 50%. Nope, more. Yeah, it's about 90%. So between 90 and 92%.
So therefore, if cuts are going to come, most likely they're going to be taking place in agricultural use if storage isn't there.
Well, what we do is, with the water code, we are required to follow a specific priority system for cuts of water. The first priority is always going to be health and safety for water, But the simple fact is any reduction we place on either set of customers, whether it be the raw water customers or treated water customers, we typically do it across the board. The challenge is that with treated water, there's already been a lot of conservation that has been built in, not just from a behavioral standpoint, but also from building standard standpoint. Any new homes are very water efficient. You just really can't move the dial that much anymore with treated water. There's not that much water waste to be taken from them. So the biggest reductions we would probably attain would be from the raw water users.
So tell me, with this relationship, this ugly relationship that you've had with PG&E, I understand before there was some thought of you buying, Spalding and other means. Is what else is on the table in your relationship with PG&E going forward, because they have rights to a lot of the water? So is that going to change? Well, I mean, what happens with PG&E here in the future and your relationship with them?
Well, if I had my ideal way, they would get out of the watershed and sell the system to us in PCWA. To date, they haven't responded favorably to that request. They just recently were trying to divest of their non-nuclear generation assets, which included all their hydropower assets. That got caught up in the Public Utilities Commission, and they kind of pulled back on that. So we're constantly trying to talk to them about that particular system and whether or not there's a challenge with them selling it, which I think is what gives them heartache or heartburn over selling it to us, is that portion of the transmission lines and that whole system is also used to burn energy off the grid when there's too much energy on the grid. And it's also an integral part of sending energy to the east. And so from that standpoint, there are some technical challenges. I don't think that they're too large to overcome, but we haven't yet been able to get them to the table to enter into serious discussions.
And is it because you're in the water business, or is it because you're a little, cog in the wheel? I mean, is it an equal relationship or far from it?
PG&E is an extremely large bureaucracy, and they are motivated largely by shareholders and public perception. And so it can be challenging to get their attention on issues we deem important to our service territory. And so when we do need their attention, we have to push on them from a number of vantage points, and the first one being a political vantage point. That seems to get them to move the most. Are they not selling to us because we're little? It's not that. I think it's, once they start selling, the dominoes start falling, right? There's other agencies that would also like them out of their watershed. So I think they have a hard time grappling with this larger concept. And frankly, I think they just don't even put time in to think about it.
Okay. So, we've talked about uphill. Let's talk about downhill, which is Sacramento. And Sacramento, the State Water Board is now getting into the business in terms of how they're looking at maintaining river flows and all for the fisheries in this state and all. So you're now facing a lot of issues relative to the State Water Board. Can you talk about those issues?
Yeah, so what Terry's referring to is there's actually a regulatory proceeding that is going on today. It's a 5-day workshop. Today is day 2. The other days are kind of spread over the next couple of months. But each and every watershed or water basin within the state is required by state law to have a basin plan. And within that basin plan, there are beneficial uses identified. And that can be from anything from kayaking to sports fishing to salmon to drinking water. There is a proceeding that's going on right now to modify the basin plan to provide additional protections for salmon beneficial uses, some spawning as well as just regular salmon. And through that proceeding, they are looking at a couple of different alternatives. So it's referred to as the Bay Delta Plan Update. We are a tributary to the Bay Delta Plan, so anything that happens to the Bay Delta Plan trickles up to us. And essentially what the two alternatives is one is referred to as unimpaired flows. So that would essentially say any water diverter, which is somebody like us who has water rights, would have to reduce our diversions anywhere from 45 to 65%. The common number is about 55%. There's an alternative regulatory pathway within the Basin Plan that's referred to as the Healthy Rivers and Landscape Program. And that is an alternative approach that was proposed by water suppliers just like us. And that is related to not as much flow, but having a larger habitat component. And so there's kind of these two pathways going on right now. The State Water Board is taking consideration of both. This has been going on for well over 10 years now. We have put the unimpaired flow scenario into our modeling, and it would be devastating for us to be able to continue to provide water. In some years, we would have to reduce our deliveries by up to 60%. Which is challenging because one of our issues is that we don't have access to groundwater. So a lot of the other diverters, they also can rely on groundwater, and that is in fact one of the mitigation strategies for water supply impacts. We don't have access to groundwater. We're also not a rim dam. We don't have direct connectivity to the deltas. So there's a lot of challenges with our water system being under an unimpaired flow scenario. Additionally, we divert water between watersheds. So we take water from the Yuba watershed and we move it over to the Deer Creek watershed and into Bear River watershed. It is unclear on how all of that would work under a 55% scenario.
And if it's not 55%, what's the other? There's a second one, a second scenario.
So that's unimpaired flow would be to be 45 to 65%. We land on 55. The other one is Healthy Rivers and Landscape, where there has been identified a flow regime for each one of the tributaries that goes into the Bay Delta, and that flow regime is based off of a water type year. There's critical, dry year, there's below normal, there's like 5 different years. So within 3 of the water years, we would be required to essentially provide flows. And so N.I.D has put forth a proposal where we would actually be providing pulse flows from spillage from Rawlins during spilling times, and we would push it into the Auburn Ravine to push salmonoids out of there so that they can continue to spawn. And then we would be repaying water at a later time.
Okay. So, I understand if there's something to be understood is the most difficult thing in California law is water law.
Yeah.
Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, water law in California is governed by the water rights priority system, and at N.I.D. we have well over 50 different water rights, and we have some of the most senior water rights within all of California. And so when there is ever a curtailment or a regulatory ask, it really should be implemented by the water rights system. So a curtailment is when there's a drought, and what it means is we're prevented from diverting water during a specific time period. When those curtailments get lifted, they get lifted in the order of seniority. So we get ours lifted first and can start diverting, and then more junior water rights, they come afterwards. One of the challenges with the Bay Delta plan is it doesn't take into consideration the water rights system. And so, if a junior water right holder cut a better deal than us, they would be able to divert more water than, say, N.I.D., who has more senior water rights. So there's a lot of legal challenges associated with it.
Wow. And so what authority is over you? I'm hearing like the water board who oversees the Bay, and is there another entity? Is the legislature that can the governor declare an emergency and all of a sudden impact you?
Yeah, it's pretty much everybody.
Everybody.
So in times of drought, the governor can issue an emergency declaration, and that's what they typically do during droughts, and that is typically how curtailments come on board. We're also regulated by the Federal Energy Regulation Commission, which we refer to as FERC. When you have a power system or any type of power project, so all of our powerhouses, we have 7 of them, for the most part, they are governed by FERC and regulated by FERC. So you'll hear a lot of us talk about FERC relicensing, and within the FERC relicensing process, our FERC license to operate our Yuba Bear project, which is our larger powerhouses, has been expired since 2013. So we've been in negotiations with FERC and a variety of different resource agencies in addition to environmental groups to come up with the conditions that would then be included in a new FERC license for that project. We've been at it for years and years. I don't have a crystal ball when we'll be issued that license, but in the license, the mitigation conditions, they not only can include flows, which we have committed to, but they can also include things such as recreational facilities, all kinds of environmental plans and studies needed, so they can be extremely costly.
Wow. So before we open it up to some questions here, you operate in, because I'm sure they've got some really specific questions, you as a woman are operating a male-dominated workforce and agency. How is that? How has that been to you here for the last couple of years?
Oh, I love it. We have some of the best staff that I've ever worked with. I've worked at cities before. We absolutely have one of the best dedicated staff. They work tirelessly to keep water flowing, and they are extremely caring about all of our customers. Our board's just been wonderful. They're extremely supportive. They ask tough questions, and they drill me a lot, but it only makes me better. So it's just been a joy to be here.
And what's been the difference? You were manager of the city of Lincoln, coming from Lincoln to now doing a water agency.
Being a city manager, which I was terrible. Yeah, that's probably one of the more terrible jobs. It's just a lot higher stress when you're dealing with police and fire. It's just a more stressful environment. I do love infrastructure. I have a degree in geology, so although I loved being a city manager and it was a wonderful experience, I learned a lot, I do love big infrastructure, so I'm excited to be here.
So Jen, before we open it up to the audience for questions, is there something in the slides we didn't touch that you think we need to talk about?
I think we covered it. I think we should go to the questions, because I could go deep on any of it.
Okay, here we go.
Bore everyone to tears.
Here we go. Yes, ma'am.
When you were talking about, the PG&E and all the other water agencies, the little ones, couldn't you guys band together and become a bigger voice to PG&E to negotiate with them?
So for everyone's sake, can't you, smaller agencies, band together to stand up to PG&E and the state and others?
Yeah, and we do on a variety of levels. So in relation to the PG&E system at Spalding, we coordinate and also have an agreement with Placer County Water Agency to exercise any joint powers should they ever declare that they will sell us the system. On a larger basis, we participate in a variety of different groups where we coalesce with other water agencies, kind of depending on what the issue is.
Good. Yes, Sandy.
COPC, where the heck are they in this?
Yeah.
So what is COPC?
The California Public Utility Commission. So any public or privately owned utility is governed by the CPUC. They're a little bit of a challenging beast in that you have to specifically point to something that they have control of in order to get them to intercede on any specific situation. We do utilize filing complaints with them to kind of get PG&E to move. But as far as them coming down with some type of mandate that says PG&E, you shall clean up your business, that's not going to happen.
So who is PG&E's? Is somebody telling PG&E, wow, you guys have not been managing your facilities properly?
No, that would be the courts.
Yeah. Okay, yes, back up the top there, ma'am.
I'm interested in the wooden flume and the replacement by steel. Where are you in terms of thinking and financing that?
Okay, so metal flumes.
Yeah, so great question. So what we are currently doing is we do what we've been doing. We've only owned the system for about 10 months now, is we are just stockpiling replacement parts, flume sheets. They all need to be custom made in the event that there's some kind of landslide or rock fall or tree fall that takes a portion out. As far as the longer term, more comprehensive replacement, we are including that into our master planning as well as into our rate setting. So, we have to collect money and able to have funds to be able to replace it, and so that's where we're at in that process.
Can you get federal or state help or grants?
Yeah, any state, federal help?
Yeah, so we try to leverage state and federal money as much as we possibly can. Many of you know about the Scotts Flat Spillway Replacement Project. So we are being required by the Division of Dam Safety to replace the spillway, and so we are going after lots of federal and state dollars for that. It's kind of one of those things you have to jump on the pot of money when it comes through. There was just a new Proposition 4, looks like it passed in California. There is some opportunity for some additional monies for that. It's just difficult to compete because they're so pigeonholed into specific categories. So we have to kind of look and say, okay, we're gonna go for this pot of money for this project or this pot of money for that project.
Great. Okay, George, you're up.
I just want to make first a statement from the perspective of the South Yuba River Citizens League Circle.
George, you've been the president the last couple of years.
Yeah, the board president. But Circle has been working closely with N.I.D., especially around Centennial Dam, since 2014, 2015. Since Jennifer has come to N.I.D. and a new board has been seated at N.I.D., the whole relationship has changed. And I just want to say publicly how appreciated the new transparency and collaborative spirit is between N.I.D. and other organizations in Nevada County and other water organizations. It's been quite a remarkable change, really. N.I.D. used to be kind of a bad guy, and I think those of us who've been around for a while remember those days. And but Jennifer has led the organization in a different direction than Ricky and Rich and other board members have. They've been a great team.
Wow, some kudos, man.
We appreciate that.
My question is, I'm fascinated by the attention being paid to the meadows way up at the top.
Oh, yeah.
And Circle and NID are both paying attention to meadows. And I don't know, you may have mentioned it earlier before it came up. The meadows are sponges, and the stuff that you do, that NID is doing with meadows, and maybe you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so what George is talking about is we are just completing a large meadow restoration project. So a lot of times when people look at the forest that we see now today, and you can't even see through the forest and all these little trees, that is not a healthy forest. So all those little sucker trees is not healthy. And in fact, I heard somebody mention something the other day that I thought was real interesting. If you read some of John Muir's old works, he talks about being able to ride through the forest 6 horses abreast. That's what a healthy forest looks like. So one of the things we're going through and doing is meadow restoration projects. It does include some tree removal, but also includes making a more healthy watershed and how water moves through the watershed, because then that watershed will be able to store more water and it won't run off as fast.
And you also have, I call them sort of straws in the ground.
Piles of straws.
And we have an inordinate amount of straws in the ground. And so the idea of tree removal actually benefits the watershed and the environment. And
the larger historic trees. So there, it does give some people heartburn when we cut down trees, but they are very selectively removed, and it's part of a larger restoration effort.
Great. Yes, sir.
So I was involved in understanding the value of a watershed in Houston, 2014. Nobody realized that 5 years after devastating fire, that created parking lots because the microorganisms that are normally the 8 feet of sponge completely turned into 6 inches. And that was directly what caused the major floods 5 years later. This relates to your watershed. Mm-hmm. So how many here have wells? So how does a watershed affect our well? Because I know that if you don't have that absorption, it doesn't create all the little creeks that then contribute to your dams. How do we find the source of our wells?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. So
Bring the mic up a little, there you go.
One of the things that is kind of a little bit unique at N.I.D. is we don't actually have any groundwater wells, but in general, in a fractured rock area, it does make it more difficult to find the resource. But what you stated is correct. So when you have overgrowth of forest, you have less water entering into the groundwater table. And in fact, one of the things of climate change that we're seeing is that in dry years, even if we have a subsequently wet year, we won't see as much runoff because most of it is being absorbed. So it all has to work together in order for it to be healthy. And so we're just starting to take a more holistic view of it.
Great. Other questions? Yes?
When you look at the administration of water across the state, does every county have an irrigation district? Your Nevada irrigation district, is that county-based or regional-based? How does it look across the state?
So how does the administrative unit look for NID? What does it
So
look
for
like?
NID, we are authorized by the irrigation code, which is within the water code. Our district, our service territory actually covers Nevada County, a portion of Placer County, a real small piece of Yuba County, and then our district area also includes portions of Sierra County. It is a total jurisdictional mess across the whole state. So some
Swell.
some are under counties, some are small irrigation districts, some are water districts. It all just depends on the specific area. So that part can be extremely challenging. And then you have big conglomerates, right? You know, like the Metropolitan Water District down in
LA.
the LA area. That's a conglomerate over a bunch of water districts. So it's all historic, and that's part of the reason why water rights in California are so complicated.
Great. Yes, my dear.
So, going back to the canal, so PG&E has spent all this money clearing their power lines, and I'm assuming that land is Forest Service and BLM that the canal is on. Have you guys been working with the forest management for maybe clearing back from those canals?
So that 14 miles, it runs through what type of ownership?
Yeah, so it's interesting when you look at property ownership maps, especially in the upper division area, which also includes the canal the South Yuba Canal. It's kind of a little bit checkerboarded between BLM and U.S. Forest Service, NID, and then some private holders. We are currently in process. We received a grant in order to complete the NEPA, which is environmental documentation for projects on federal land, in order to come in and do some more clearing on U.S. Forest Service property. U.S. Forest Service, they don't do as much restoration forest work as we do, and that's why we applied for a grant on their behalf to do the work on their property. And so we do coordinate with them.
And that's sort of the means to be able to provide some clearing for your major problem area, which is fire on the Yuba Canal.
Yeah, we also have transmission lines as well. So we go through and do clearing for fire prevention on transmission lines around transformers. We go through and do rock scaling. We look at any kind of, every single year, twice a year, we walk all the facilities to see if there's any hazard trees. We go and systematically remove those trees each and every year. So we do a lot of monitoring and tree removal.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes, Tom.
I'm a little fascinated by the 90% of water that goes to the raw users, which theoretically is agriculture. But I was down in South County, and it wasn't agriculture in my house, and we bought the Ridge, which is a ridiculous measure of water that you might want to talk about. And the rate for the overall water was really low relative to what everybody else pays for treated water. Of course, there's the treatment involved in all that, but it seems like a big burden of the economics should be carried by the group of people that are buying the 90% of the goods.
Yeah, that's a great question. So in California, Proposition 218 doesn't allow us to use funds from one set of ratepayers to subsidize another set of ratepayers. So when we go through this rate setting process, these are the discussions we will be having. And, you know, it's really challenging because agricultural is a big part of the community, specifically in Nevada County, and there's some bigger agriculture in Placer County. And so it's just a gentle balance of ensuring we collect enough revenue to provide a level of service that's needed to continue to make water deliveries, but also make improvements to use less water and deliver water more efficient. So, stay tuned for those conversations. We'll be having them this spring.
So this is, so, if I'm getting a miner's inch, you believe that your agency now needs to get proactive in this and start to say, well, do you really need a miner's inch? Because there are other ways that you can use that water or store some of that water. Is that what you see as NID's next mission also, to be able to sort of analyze your users, especially in your agricultural community, or not?
Well, there's a couple of challenges. So a lot of people kind of make this one fundamental mistake. So even though, say you buy a miner's inch, you buy a miner's inch, everyone in this room buys one miner's inch each. That's not how we operate the system. We operate the system on a larger global basis. So we operate the system based off of in-stream gauges we have, in-canal gauges we have, what our operators are seeing. It takes us 4 days to move water from the upper reservoirs all the way down to the lowest delivery points. So we're not, even in a treated water system where, I could go online if you have a Badger meter to tell you exactly how much water use is going on in your house right now. We still don't manage the system based off of that data. We manage it on a more global scale.
Okay. Yes.
So this is a completely different topic, but related to water. There are fire-wise communities that have treated water in their community, but there are no fire hydrants in certain areas. Is it possible to have fire hydrants installed in these areas if there's treated water? And how would you go through your agency to start that?
Yeah, it just depends on the specific water system. So if it is a treated water system that we own, usually what communities do is they get together and then they purchase the materials or pay us to purchase them, and then we can come install fire hydrants. But I will caution you, not every treated system is conducive to having a fire hydrant. You have to go through a fire flow analysis, ensure there's enough pressure within the system to operate a fire hydrant. But it really is on a case-by-case basis. So you'd have to, anytime, reach out, call myself, or I'll get you in touch with somebody, and then we can look at any specific concerns you have.
Great. Yes, sir.
Fire and the system of delivery of water, I perceive that once that area burns, then you have erosion. And I can visualize tremendous amount of failure in our ditches. In my case, I live in Lake of the Pines. That's a very small issue around here, but that's 2,000 homes. And we get our water from Bear River via ditch. If we had failure on that ditch, significant, which is a very minor ditch in the way you're talking today, how do you take care of that? Is there money ready to go and the background to take and get that ditch back?
So let's talk globally for a second. How is the state of your earthen ditches, and what's the oversight for those?
They're in a variety of different states. Many of them have been around since the late 1800s. And as many of you know, they are literally a dirt ditch, that we serve water through. In the situation if there's a large fire, in fact, the Bear River fire, we had to deal with this specific issue. So we immediately deploy staff, start removing debris, do whatever we can. We can also, depending on the level of the emergency, we start tapping into county OES, state OES, even FEMA. But we also keep emergency reserves on hand to be able to deal with any large emergency issues that we're going to have to throw a lot of money at quickly. In the case of a fire, one of the biggest challenges is all the debris will clog up the treatment plant. And so we'll implement pre-treatment measures. We'll start screening water before it even gets into the system, because once you kind of clog those systems up, you could have a huge issue. Like, for example, the town of Washington, they had a huge mudslide. One of their water tanks got annihilated, and our staff actually went in and cleaned it for them. So it is a possibility. We are able to remediate it. We move extremely quickly, and that is why we keep emergency cash on hand.
Jen, let's finish this full circle. We started with PG&E, we'll end again with PG&E.
Oh, no.
Sorry about that. So you said that there were 4 issues. How far away are we from resolving each of those issues at this point?
Okay, so the South Yuba pipeline has been repaired, that's back online. They repaired one of the discharge horns and most of the column work that needed to be repaired at Spalding 1. We will have another outage this year. They had repaired Spalding 2, but then broke the powerhouse again. They're in testing right now to see if the repair is going to stick. So we will make a call whether or not, the original plan was to go into another outage, which we'll experience reduced water supplies again this next year in kind of the March timeframe. Depending on how much water we have, we will either make a go or no-go call. Our biggest concern is associated with Scotts Flat, because if we cannot get water into Scotts Flat through Spalding 2 and down the South Yuba pipe, we could have some challenges. So, you know, it's kind of touch and go as to when they're going to be able to complete the remaining repairs. The low-level outlet is kicked out a couple of years, which is unfortunate. But we have meetings constantly with us and PG. In fact, we just had one yesterday going through all of the different scenarios. Finally got a schedule from them. So we are constantly working on it, but we will see impacts into next year and possibly into the following year.
Wow. Won't you say how great it is to have a positive NID and a tremendous leader in Jennifer Hanson. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you all for coming.